Hello, strangers, and welcome back. Or if you're new, please settle in and enjoy the one true scary story on offer every week. This story is number 57. It's pretty common in the Midwest that the Lucent Corporation and remnants of homesteads scattered around the plains contain cemeteries, family burial grounds, unmarked by Google Maps and hidden behind the kind of directions you expect out in BFE. Drive towards the old Samson place. Turn left at the broken windmill. It's a dialect of the region that you need to live here to get. But once you do, it just makes sense. Or so my friend Sonia said. When this happened, we were just a couple of girls. She was new to our school. I wasn't, but I was very into music and fashion that I glimpsed online, so I dressed and acted in a way that was new to our school as well. And they weren't fans. Sonia and I thus cemented ourselves together by our outsider status. So Sonia was at my house a lot. Not that there was much to do there. Again, small town in the middle of nowhere. Sonia was used to living in a place with malls and miniature golf. I wasn't, but I was all too happy to agree with Sonia that the town bored me too. However, in my search for a personality to set me apart, I went full tilt into what I had, and at the time of this story, I was full tilt into my tea party in a cemetery goth phase. Just grasping for anything that would make me like Lily Munster. Sonia was fascinated that people just had unofficial burial sites seemingly behind every copse of oak trees. She thought it was strange that you could go to put in a flower garden and hit somebody's grandma, that random graveyards just sprouted everywhere. After I corrected her that graveyards have to be attached to churches and cemeteries can in fact be wherever, like the little pedant I was, and she rejoined that my face could be wherever, we headed out for that day's adventure to one such cemetery. We navigated by random hillocks and broken down farm equipment to stumble across the Kramer plot. What stood out about this one was the angel statue. The matriarch of the family, Agnes Kramer, had warranted a 4-foot-tall angel held aloft on another 4-foot-tall pedestal. The angel must have shone as bright as a new penny at some point, but by the time Sonia and I encountered her, she'd gone a soft, glowing bronze. It was like the angel was watching over the cemetery plots, her mother's eye still assessing them, keeping trouble at bay. The same stoic face watched Sonia and I approach. Remember, you were warned about my try-hard gothery. I had brought a book of vellum and charcoal with which to do gravestone rubbings. Literally, you put the paper over the top of the stone, then rub the charcoal over it to capture an impression of the raised letters and symbols underneath. It doesn't hurt the grave marker in any way, and back home I had a collection of scrapbooks of them. Make of it what you will, but like I said, rural town. Not like we had a water park. We had our lunch, careful not to leave trash or otherwise disrespect the scene before leaving. This meant that, a couple of weeks later, Sonia had a frame of reference when her mom mentioned the vandalism. When pressed, Sonia's mom spilled more details that Sonia in turn relayed to me minutes later on the phone. Someone had stolen the gravestones out of the Kramer plot. We biked over and encountered a small crowd. two of the current Kramer homesteaders, a reporter, and an old country sheriff, faces lined as a road map. The angel was still at her post, but her outstretched hands now gestured over a cemetery pocked with clumps of dirt and holes where the dearly departed had been named. It was like she was pointing these holes out at we onlookers, saying, "Look at this." We only had time to hear the sheriff point out some tire tracks, note that someone had likely backed up a dually truck to make the loading easier, before getting the attention of all the grown-ups. Sonia had stepped in to talk to the sheriff as I turned to face the two remaining Kramers. One was a stern-looking woman with hair that hadn't slowly faded into silver so much as galvanized into steel gray. The man beside her was older, ears prickly with bushy white hair. I couldn't see his face. He had his weathered hand over it. Realizing that he was crying made me turn my face away, at once overcome with shame and sadness for him. I felt my eyes sting and water at the sorrow in his stooped, shaking shoulders. The stern lady was saying something about how she wished they'd robbed the farmhouse, burned it if they needed to destroy something so badly. Then I felt a large hand clamp on my shoulder. Sonia had stalled him as long as she could, but the sheriff was telling us it was time to get a move on, scolding us back to our bikes about our rubbernecking. We rode back to Sonia's house and secluded in her room to talk about it. But what was there to say? We railed against the awful people who could have done such a thing. How, even when you're dead, you're not safe from the jerks of the world. Sonia's point was, they literally stole from the dead. Didn't that used to mean something? Like a curse on their land or something? I thought about that poor old man again and carefully wiped under my eye, trying to blot the tear forming there from tracking my smeared eyeliner further down my cheek. I told Sonia I hoped so, and we both fell silent. It wasn't until a couple of days later that, by chance, I saw a picture of the Kramer burial plot on a newspaper in the recycling bin. I fished it out and read what had been given as a statement. The paper said that there were no leads beyond a particular kind of truck, that it had happened sometime between 9 p.m. and 4 a.m. when the homeowners, a Rudolph Rudy Kramer, and his daughter, Josephina, awoke to find their pasture gate swinging open. The article was mostly the cops asking for anyone who had info to come forward. Josephina's comment about the property damage being second to the blow struck to their legacy was quoted. Rudy only had one quote: "Please, bring my family back." God, what a gut punch. I was consumed with that the whole day, to the point where my parents, already very used to their daughter's somber mood, even asked if I was okay. I was already in bed, teeth brushed, when it suddenly hit me. The gravestone rubbings. I clambered out of bed and went to my desk and dug out my Memento Mori album. I flipped through it, pausing to pop the rings and remove the sections from the few other cemeteries I'd visited. All told, I had 27 grave rubbings from the Kramer plot, right down to the details and little flourishes. Would they be mad I'd done it? I didn't know, but at the thought of that old farmer's plea, it was more than they had right now. It was something I could do. I thought again about the matronly Josephine cradling the shotgun in the crook of her elbow. Anonymously. It was something I could do anonymously, just in case. I texted Sonia to ask her mom if she could sleep over the following Friday. Over the next couple of days, we planned our return to the Kramer homestead. We snuck out and biked the back roads, extinguishing our bike lights about a mile out from where the knotty pine fencing started, indicating their property line. We continued on foot, slowly walking our bikes over the rutted road. Even though we'd been out there a dozen times, it had always been in the day. At night, the oak trees looked hunched, grouped together like they were plotting something. There was a fine misty fog floating over the ground, hiding potholes and dips in the road. No birds sang. The night was dead, hanging like a wet towel after a shower. Sonia and I kept bumping into each other, subconsciously huddling closely to each other as we crept past where the cemetery came into view. I looked to the angel. I shouldn't have. Her protective stature was no longer for me. She glistened, looking dead black in the night. Her outstretched arms now looked claw-like, beckoning us to join her dead. Sonia recoiled against me, telling me she looks like a gargoyle. I shushed her even as I agreed, and we hastened our pace as much as the silence would let us. We'd just made it past. Her figure was just out of our peripheral vision when we both stopped cold in our tracks at a sound. In the night air so wet it felt like the sound was drowning, too heavy to rise to ear level and really be heard. A child's laugh, high-pitched, cut through. The same sound effect of 1,000 horror movies you'd meet with an eye roll will absolutely put the fear of God into you when you hear it out in the real world on a dark dirt road. That prickling terror, however, immediately gave way to relief. I wasn't out here alone. Sonia was obviously goofing on me. It made me stop holding my breath to realize that. We made our way to the farmhouse proper. I dared only leave the book on a chair on the porch and slink back. I studiously avoided even glancing in the direction of the cemetery, and I bet Sonia did too. But when we got back to our bikes, we were too concerned with getting the hell out of there to talk it over, even then, either. As my bedroom door clicked shut behind us, all the way back home, I turned and looked at my friend, who had collapsed dramatically on my bed. She told me that that was insane. I agreed and told her that if she hadn't laughed, I probably would have lost my nerve. She looked surprised, then asked what did I mean, what laugh? As the memory of that light, girlish giggle rolled back into my mind, we both realized it at the same time. I felt my skin break out in goose pimples. I asked her, wasn't that you who giggled? And her only response was, you heard it too? Oh man, we stared at each other. By the time we got to bed, we'd rationalized it. It was a bird, the old fence creaking in the wind, anything obvious. And what wasn't obvious was a child's laugh out of a stock horror movie. I was still unnerved by it, and I think Sonia was too. We slept in, finally appearing in the kitchen in the late morning. My mom raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. It was Sunday, and we weren't religious, so our sleeping in was fine. She was doing a crossword in the newspaper when I caught a glimpse at the front page, one she'd discarded onto the table. The news was about the Kramers. It was not about the gravestone rubbings, but it was about the Kramer plot. Specifically, something else that had been taken. The Masons were another old family, further down the road, a term that could mean minutes or hours of travel. The twin girls had been out roaming the lands, playing a mashup version of hide-and-seek and freeze tag. They'd rambled into the Kramer plot at some point in their play, not maliciously so as much as simply not paying attention. That's the bit that probably makes it worse. One of the twins, the paper reported, was on the run from the other. Her hiding spot had been found, and she needed to avoid her sister's grasp until she could reach home base. She ran behind the tall pillar with the grape leaves. Her twin followed her. She ran past a cluster of oaks, the sun filtering through their leaves, dappling spots of light on her face as she ran past. Her twin followed her. She took a sharp left and ran behind the angel statue. Her twin tripped, not making the turn, and lost a couple of seconds in finding her feet again. When she turned around to see where her sister had made it to next, she was met with an empty cemetery. The twin that she had been chasing had disappeared. As this new story unspooled, it turned out that the gravestones were recovered. The Mason patriarch had stolen them because he, quote, needed weight for the back of his truck, unquote. I'm not kidding. His daughter was still missing, and he was obviously preoccupied when the city's folk and the Kramers showed up to reclaim their family grave markers. At least, he was until they pulled the last of them away from the truck bed. They found her body under the gravestones. It made no sense. Those stones were lethal heavy, and the girl was no more than 40 pounds herself. But as with anything else, as with two scared girls wondering who giggled in a cemetery, I think they just rationalized it away, made up some story about her hightailing it 2 miles back to her parents' house to find a new hiding spot and getting crushed after trying to slide in between the stones. I'm still a spooky goth kid. Well, no longer a kid. People ask me how I got into the whole goth thing even now. I have a variety of answers depending on how deeply I care to entertain or not offend them. But ultimately, looking at black and white pictures of a cemetery, I felt I saw the way that the world balances perfectly on a scale. The Mason family took something from the Kramer family. To balance the scale, the Kramer family took something of the Mason families in return. When the gravestones were returned, so was the girl. It's a feral kind of eye for an eye in place of turning the cheek, and as anyone who reads this may have had to swallow pride or hurt to be the bigger person, it's attractively tit for tat. In a world of nuance and ambiguity, the dark balance of backwoods karma is so simple, a small child could understand it. You might have noticed that this is not a Tuesday upload. It's one of the secret holidays, specifically the Ides of March. It's not going to get you time off at work, but Ides of March is a very good time to make amends and to pay back. And of course, when I sat down to figure out my list of secret holidays, I had to think of one where I acknowledged and gave back. So this is for you, my friendly strangers. Because without you, well, I'm just talking to myself. Like, comment, subscribe, as you wish, and just know I am so very grateful for all of you. I can't believe that we've made it to 92. It's a little incredible and a little nerve-wracking. Thank you for making sure I'm not alone. Until next time, Take care, strangers.